So thanks very much for joining us, Aurora. On today's call, we have Aurora Fearnley. Aurora is a director and an actress. Haven't you just been on Game of Thrones? Did I? Not Game of Thrones. The Crown.
The Crown.
The
Yeah, a
Crown.
very small blink and you miss it. So, but I get to hang out with some pretty exciting main cast playing the Duchess of Kent, which yeah,
James was telling me. I was like, oh no way. She didn't. I had no idea.
yeah. Oh,
Oh,
I have beeping going on.
no worries. It's okay.
I mean, I actually don't know how to turn it off. It's been happening for about a month, and I have no idea what's doing it.
It'll be some kind of notification. It's all good. Doesn't
Yes.
matter.
There's no way to turn off all notifications, is there? They get to you somehow.
Yeah, they are. The notifications are annoying. The little pings, and they're like attention grabbers. I've tried to turn them all off on my phone because whenever it buzzes, it's the phone going, "I want your attention," and I'm like, "No, I'm not going to give my attention to you, you inanimate object."
I learned a trick from the Silicon Valley guys, which is if you can set it up so you press your home screen 3 times, it turns to black and white. That way you don't get triggered by color because because they know how trigger happy we get on seeing red symbols or the color of an app because they work on it.
Yeah,
They just make sure they don't have fall into the traps that they're creating for other people.
that's interesting because their part of their job is to hack the human consciousness.
Right.
Isn't
Yeah.
it? To
Yeah.
make you spend as much time on whatever platform it is to grab your attention because your attention is valuable.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting, an interesting ponderance for a filmmaker because a filmmaker, writer, or even an actor is trying to take the audience's attention and deliver value to them through the story. I guess in a
Yeah.
way.
I mean, as a consumer of media, aside from being a filmmaker, I always feel an overwhelm now. It's, it gets
Yeah.
seasons happening and it's all the lists of this year's best television, the best performances, the breakthrough this, and there's a lot of shoulds. Like I should be watching all the debuts because I'm doing my debut and I
Mm,
pay attention to what's come out of the UK because I work in the UK. And suddenly you're inundated with just so much to watch. And it's hard, I think, as a filmmaker to recognize that actually what you ingest is still part of what you produce. And so this idea of what wins awards or is popular is not always the right choice. So for me at the moment, I'm teaching at an MA level directing course. And what's great is I'm having to go back into, 50,
the,
60
the
years ago.
classics.
Exactly. And I'm watching things and thinking, there's a lot out there, but we're being less and less discerning about what we choose to watch. We're having the same trigger effects with a headline as we do with a moving image, and we're clicking on the person or we're clicking on the genre before reading a review. In fact, we want to see it before the review comes out because we like being first finders.
Yeah, and there's an
Yes.
absolute avalanche of content, and often as a independent creative, there is exactly as you've just highlighted. There is the feeling of I need to be consuming this, but then I think audiences' attention, definitely audiences' attention are so fragmented, and there's so much competition for them in not even in the film industry, in the game industry, in other media. There's so much media to consume,
Yeah.
but at the same time, these explosions in these platforms, which is really exciting, right, for an independent creative. But I
Yes.
think you hit on something interesting there because going back to the classics and what is like a timeless piece of art is timeless. It doesn't have to be current or released on Netflix just recently. But it can be. But it's yeah, this is an interesting way to start the conversation.
But I think that the flip side of it is that if you're a freelance filmmaker in a time where everybody's consuming so much more media, that flip of overwhelm is pressure for you to be seen, because it's like if there's so much out there and everyone's watching more than they've ever, between 7 and 8 hours of television per day in some form of either social media or YouTube, if your stuff's not getting watched, then you feel more like a failure. So I think this is a really interesting thing to note is that in this time of consumerism, consuming media, it's hard. I think filmmakers have to take a step away from that to see about, I have to really make things that are important to me. I have to only really invest my time in creating projects where I have something I need to say, because people are going to connect with that in a way where previously we had the 5D revolution 10 years ago when I first started filmmaking, and it was like, okay, great, we have this cheaper form of filmmaking, and now any 20-year-old can make a web series. Well, there are a lot of web series out there now. There's a lot of people trying to grab attention, and I think attention grabbing is completely the wrong thing. We are in the age of authenticity. So if you want to make a story, you have to have something to say, because we're connecting now more to truth than we are to show.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And it becomes very evident in the work that Liftoff connects with,
Yes.
and the best of it is has that authenticity and has that lack of. It's a fine line, because you have to command your audience's attention, but you don't want to be shouting.
Yeah.
And I think the positive side of it is that there's so much shouting by so many artists that, like, you can do something different and clearly stand out. If you can find your own voice within the noise, then it doesn't. And exactly as you said, if you're making something for a reason, I mean, it sounds cliche, and it's a phrase that's repeated quite a lot, so it kind of loses its meaning. But it has a real meaning. Like,
Yeah.
what is the point of making this, I don't know, boy meets girl story?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is the point of it? What are you adding to the genre, to the conversation, to the to the story, whatever?
Content, or are you making a film?
Yeah.
And I think this is what I want younger filmmakers to think about, which is not just to make something, but to
Were you
make.
teaching?
I'm teaching the MA at the Met Film School in Ealing.
Ah, nice.
I also do teaching at the London Film Academy, the London Film School, some Central School of Speech and Drama, and the Northern Film School.
So quite a lot.
Teaching's kind of crept up on me in the last year or so, and that's an interesting thing, which is I had really resisted it, because I thought, as a freelance filmmaker, I didn't have time to teach. I didn't have time to be a writer, director, and an actor, as well as a teacher. But it turns out that if you just say yes to the things that come easily, then those other things will find space. It's what's happened this time.
That's an interesting insight. Say yes to the things that come easily, because so you're not fighting against yourself, saying I should be doing this.
100%.
You're saying yes, and then your creativity can grow from there. Interesting. So let's take it, if we can, right back to the beginning. So you're originally an actress, is that correct?
Yeah, I started in acting really young, and I wanted to go to drama school, and I didn't go to drama school. And that made me feel in my 20s that I was never going to be an actor. So I kind of shelved that. I went to film school instead. And that was interesting, because being at a film school, people needed actors all the time. So I got to just continue acting through most of my 20s, but without the pressure of it being a professional job, and with the relaxed kind of fun of it being amdrams and just helpful. So I got to work in loads of short films, on feature films and commercials, and had quite a good career without any of the pressure of having to do well. Which was
those days.
Yeah.
those days were good.
Yeah.
Like the Amdram days as a young aspiring actor.
Yeah.
And you're right. There is no pressure of like, now's time to step up.
Yeah. None of it is time, kind of very serious. But I was very serious about my directing, and I did take real pains to make everyone know that I was a director, and I was going out there. Really, I started with music videos and commercials, and made an awful lot of those, because you could. I mean, like I said, the 5D revolution. You had Final Cut, you had a 5D. You could do everything. So I started a production company. We started making music videos. We got signed to an agency in London, and that was, we were living the dream at the age of 24, which is what you want. but you think it's a ladder. It's really not. So I had to make a decision at some point that actually I wanted to be making drama. And if I continued on the commercial promo route, it would take up all my time and all my energy. And I might step into a different world than the one that I was most inspired by, which is storytelling.
For sure. And I guess you get all your time gets taken up, as you said, and then you find yourself working on the same stuff over and over and over again.
Yeah, there was one producer who said to me, music videos now, and this is like, 2006, 2007, is doing the impossible for the thankless, because it's so little money, and you're creating briefs, you're pitching on 2-3 projects a week, and that's all your time, and then new ideas, and then something will come through and you're doing it within 2 weeks, and it's delivery, and it's incredibly fast, and it's really no money. It's not going to pay for hardly anything, so you're kind of doing it for the joy of it.
Yeah.
Like that whole music video industry kind of disappeared after like the late 90s, early 2000s, and they were spending 75,000 to do a music video with the Spice Girls. It just doesn't happen in this. There are some people, but really now it's branded content.
Yeah. And you didn't see a route into drama from that. It was just like a never-ending world of creating stuff for corporate clients and music videos, and there was you found that there was no way that you could do both at the same time, or
I was part of a directing collective, so it was 3 of us working together, so we were signed as 3. So so we had started a company as 3, and rather than be one director, we all directed, and then we all would take turns to rotate that central role and first AD and edit on everyone else's projects. But as you can imagine, 3 20-something-year-olds wanting to direct is a recipe for frustration, because if one of us
me next.
Well, this is it. We had to find a way for it to work, because we all wanted to continue growing and everyone else was being supportive on those roles. So I mean, this is the great thing about finding like-minded people that work with you. The problem comes with the boundaries. So we set up a boundary system where whoever pitched a project would make the project. They would be lead director. But that problem had a flip side, when the same person would repeatedly win a pitch, not giving room to other people. And it just felt like that relationship had run its course in terms of wanting to progress as a director. So the right decision was to leave that company and let it to be 2 people, to move to London and to start making my own work. So it was a terrifying leap into the unknown, but it was the only way I could see at the time to just start fresh.
I see. So you were doing that in Leeds, was it?
Yeah.
And Leeds, and then you decided to come to London. What was that like?
I mean, it was good. I actually got 2 short films commissioned while I was still in Leeds, which was, I think, part of the impetus to kind of, I can do this on my own, and I'm pitching projects that are getting financed, so let's do that. Moving to London, it was such a breath of fresh air, because one of the things about being in Leeds is it was cheap enough to be able to hire a studio space, to have an office, and to be a real production company with very small overheads. But all of our work, all of our money was coming from London, all of our agents, all of that. So we were booking the work there, and then we were making it up north, which was cost effective. But you were having to create all of that opportunity in a place where there wasn't much, which meant you felt like a bigger fish in a smaller pond. And then as soon as I came down here, I knew that I would be out of my depth. But the one thing is, I wasn't having to generate any of that work. There was just opportunity everywhere. Yeah. So all the time and energy I would be putting into in Leeds about creating my own opportunity, here I walked into opportunity so regularly that time and energy was spent on creating projects. So it just worked out that I could progress faster.
Sure, that makes sense. It's the same thing from a move to the UK to Los Angeles for many people, I know. Whilst London is definitely the hub of the UK, LA is definitely the hub of filmmaking in general, for better or for worse, really.
Yes, well, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you spend any time in LA?
Never been.
I'll go
and call me when they call me over.
Yeah. It's an interesting place. There's definitely much more of a bigger industry out there, but then there's a lot more noise. And we're talking about noise at the beginning. There's way more noise. Um,
Yeah.
but I love it. I do love it when we go for the festival. There's some really really nice, like centered, creative, artistic people, but then there's also a hell of a lot of crazy. But
Yeah.
okay, you get that everywhere, I guess.
I think it comes back to that same thing about what kind of work you want to make, because
Mm,
again, there's a lot more content being created. But then I've been lucky to grow up in the European film industry, and to be influenced and to go to, and those festivals are so close to me. So traveling over to somewhere like Reykjavik or Rotterdam or Berlin, and having the smaller festivals invite you and getting to know those communities, what they're looking for is quite different to what an American audience or the LA kind
sure.
of more is looking for. So I'm not even entirely sure yet, if I'm willing to move so far away from the things that make me really grounded as a filmmaker.
100%. And there is definitely a side of the LA scene that is a feeding machine for LA, American TV and American, like, the studio system as well. So it's just this, and that's a very specific thing. And if that's what you like, then perhaps it's good. But if not, then perhaps it's not the best. If you like the auteur European way of making cinema, like story driven, director
Yeah.
driven
I'm just
projects.
thinking about what a contradiction it is, because I love genre. So you would imagine that
Mm,
that's the place to go. So in the UK, there's very few female directors that do sci-fi horror or high octane kind of thriller, and that's kind of where I'm kind of been heading. And I think everyone has been saying, oh, you need to go to LA, that's where it's all happening. And I thought, well, why go to where it's saturated when there's very few people here doing it? In a way, you kind of would stand out. It's a bit like being back in Leeds and saying, well, I feel like a bigger fish in this pond, because how many people can you name that have brought out sci-fi movies who are women in the UK? How many can you
yeah.
name who have done horrors? Is
Yeah.
there a benefit in finding out where you are known for something, rather than competing in a place where everybody has an expectation that, of course women do sci-fi in LA, of course loads of them.
Yeah. 100%.
But
So
yeah.
sorry to cut you
No,
off. So let's go through your creative projects then. So what was your first short film?
the first short film I did was called Shades of Living,
Hmm.
and that was with for Manchester funded it. This is before we had BFI and oh my god, I'm showing my age. Before we had England hubs. So it was UK Film Council money, and being a northerner, I was able to access a small pot of money, £2,000, something called Green Shoots,
Okay.
where you don't get to write the scripts. You're brought in as, there were six directors, six writers, six producers, all new, and we read the scripts, met each other, we pitched to work together, and then they selected who you got to work with. Um, yeah, and they oversee it as an exec. I mean, 2,000 is not a lot, 2,200, I think, for a first film, but it was, this was what, 2007, 8, it's a while back. So I graduated 2005, started the production company a few years after that. And this, I managed to just kind of sneak in under the radar before we were leaving. So Shades of Living was a story about a family who are struggling with the breakdown of a loss, which is eroding their marriage, and it's through the perceptions of a young boy who's watching this happen within his family. So it's a young boy's story with a supernatural twist. And that did really well. It went to lots of little festivals. I went over to Sarasota in Florida. I got over to New York and a few places like that. I was really surprised how much that coast of America really liked Yorkshire on screen. So that was film number one, and that was with a production company in the north called Finite Pictures.
So
They're doing well now.
so you didn't know any. You didn't have any connections with the people that you worked with on that project. It was you
You're
coming
just,
with a team.
yeah, you have to just pitch yourself, and you're there as like new talent to be kind of mentored or kind of shaped at that point. But I knew a lot of the screen agencies because I've been going to all those events and I've been networking with their execs. And so I think when your application comes in the door, if you've been noisy. Look, I've been making all these music videos. Look, I've been doing this, and they're willing to give you a bit more of a chance.
Interesting. And then, so from the success of that, what did you then do?
Then I think that's when I discovered a competition called Enter the Pitch, and they would think it was only the second year they'd been running, and not people knew about it. So the standard of entries was quite low in terms of filmmakers, and the brief was to reimagine a Bible story, which I think put a lot of people off, because if they had any kind of feelings around religion, that might have meant that they wouldn't think that they could do that competition, even though competitions are all faiths. And I put in a pitch for that on a Nokia mobile phone for a reimagining of the Bible story of Daniel, done as 1920s schoolboy who's got psychic abilities to decode the Enigma Project.
Oh, wow.
Film. Yeah, it's a short film. And it got to the final 10. And I was really thrilled. And I went to Pinewood, I pitched, and didn't make the final 3, didn't make the final. I uploaded it before going on holiday to China with my sister to something called the Nokia Shorts competition. It was a global Vimeo competition.
I remember it.
Yeah, I was away for 3 weeks. And the day I got back, I found out that it had been selected. So it was one of 7 international people. And they gave us around £6,000. And they sent us out 2 Nokia phones and said, shoot your film.
Oh, wow.
So I hadn't changed my pitch much from what I'd done. Actually, I hadn't changed it at all, apart from made it a bit shorter from what I did with Enter the Pitch to Nokia. So I was really blown away that had not won locally, but had won globally. It was a good lesson.
What do you think that was?
Well, it's about understanding the brief of a competition, because I made most of my films through competitive funding. Finding money. You have to understand what the brief is asking for, and they're not asking you to be a great filmmaker or have an amazing idea. They're asking for you to understand why they're giving you free money.
So it's not about you as a filmmaker. It's about you as a filmmaker achieving what they're looking for.
In a way, competition filmmaking is like being inside a studio.
Yeah.
They've got branded content. So the only reason there's money to make a film is because they have a message, then they have something that they're selling. So you as a filmmaker need to understand, how do I have an original idea that I believe in, that I want to say, that also fits into this constrained brief that will give me the money to make it. And that's been a real juggling act throughout my career.
I think that's an interesting insight in pitching in general, really, isn't it? It's not about, it is about you and what the project is and how good you are, but it's how does that help the person that you want funding or connection or whatever it is with. That's an interesting insight, yeah.
Sometimes a competition is we are looking for an individual that we believe that we want to promote. Sometimes it is. And there's nothing you can really do about that apart from be yourself. But I think the problem comes when people try to fit their own original ideas into a brief when the brief asks you to come up or generate something from scratch with their kind of containment in mind. So I noticed that with the pitch, because I went back the second year and pitched a new project, and it got into the final again. And what was really interesting was the feedback was they felt like it wasn't. It was completely original. I'd used the story of Ezekiel as a kind of like mad prophet. But what was interesting was just understanding more and more about what they wanted and how vague my connection was to their brief meant that it wasn't a safe enough option to really tell a story that they needed to tell. Which I think has been really useful, because I thought what I had to do was turn up and just show them I could make films and I was good, and they would just give me the money. I was like, well, it's a really good idea.
I think that's the assumption, isn't it?
Yeah. I was like, well, I could obviously make films. Look at all these music videos. I've been doing it for this length of time. I've worked with all these people. I've had this experience with equipment, and it's the ego youth director that I see all the time teaching that I reflect back on and just go, oh, God, it took a really long time to understand that's not directing. It's like. It's just, but then that folly of youth, that thing of thinking you can, is what drives you into those boardrooms with like 12 people watching to do 20-minute presentations.
100%. Were you doing all of this on your own as well?
Yeah, every time.
You were driving it all on your own. You didn't have any partners that you were working with?
No, I was also really actually up to the third time I applied. Up to that point, I think actually on the first one, Daniel, I had a co-writer because we were wanting to do it, and then yes, no, that first one we did have a co-writer. But again, it became an amalgamation of an idea they had already had with me amalgamating it with the Bible kind of character. So when we did the Nokia short, Susan, she wrote the script, and we just kind of went back at that point to her original idea rather than using as much of the Bible idea, which was great because we got to shoot in a swimming pool. We did underwater scenes. I mean, these phones went down to 20-meter depths. So, that was great fun. We got to shoot in Cheatham's Music Hall, which looks like Harry Potter. So, yeah, there was all these things you could do on a cheeky mobile that you couldn't have done with other phones because it was so risky. I remember the first time I held it in the bath in this plastic, carry case for the beach. And I was like, right, one of these phones might die tonight. And we'll give us one. But, that's the good stuff that you do is experimenting. And then you have lovely underwater footage, which is what I took into my pictures later on and people were impressed by. So,
yeah,
good risk.
Yeah, really, really, really good risk. And then what was next?
Okay, so I've done Shades of Living, which is in Cumbria, and I did Daniel, which was the Vimeo short, which went to Edinburgh, which was great, did really well, went online. Then I was still with my production company, Left Eye Blind, and we applied for a pot of money from my old university that we didn't know existed. We found out 2 weeks before it closed that it did, and that was a film we made called Life on the Line, and that was for a pot of £10,000.
This is where we first met you, I think.
I think it was, yes.
Yeah.
So this is probably the third film, I think. And what was great and what was terrible was we decided that we would make this piece of drama as 3 people directing rather than having a shared leadership, because I was the only one who was eligible for the grant because it was my university. But we were going to take so much time off from our production company that it wasn't fair for one person to direct.
Okay,
so
that makes sense.
It sounds like it makes sense, but 3 people directing one drama doesn't work.
No.
But what it did do is it because I have a lot of deep respect for the 2 people I worked with. At the end of that project, I just knew that I had to go my own way.
So it was a final confirmation.
Yes.
In a way.
So it's I'm going to do this even though it feels like it's impossible, because I want this relationship and I want this company to work. And if we can do this and we can be 3 people directing a project, and of course I had to be the lead director on that project because the finance came through me, and I think that's also hard because it turned out we all just wanted to be making films. We all wanted to be doing drama, and nobody really wanted to just be making music videos or content. So this one opportunity for any one of us to have taken it would have been so hard for the other 2.
Yeah. Which
is good because we tried something really risky and found out that we all needed to just go and grow individually. Life on the Line was a story that was about a young man who's been in a coma for a long time with epilepsy, and when he wakes up he can't reconnect with the world around him. He feels much more embedded in his kind of dream state reality, and he works at a night call centre. And this is all combined with the fact that all of us has had to work at call centres, having left university looking for media jobs, and my own experience of being bedridden with illness for 3 or 4 years, my teenage years. So we had a very interesting, we could all kind of feed into it how what we had to say fitted into that story world, which I think it has the music video feel to it that we were producing at the time as well. It's kind of ephemeral. It's like a dream.
And they gave you you got the 10 grand funding for it?
Yes, that's right. And then
That's amazing.
We all put in another 5 between us, I think. So it was jumping up. So that first music video, or that first film was 2,000. The next one that was Daniel was about 4 or 5. And then this one was about 15.
So there was a steady progression and it felt like you were moving forwards. And was there any big differences in terms of what you could afford or what you could afford to do? And I guess we'll get to Pulsar at the end, I guess. We'll get the end. But then, so perhaps we'll save this question for later when we can compare, what's the difference between directing on the different budget scales?
Well, I mean, here's the interesting thing. So, Enter the Pitch, I was trying every year. So, I'd done Daniel, got knocked back, made it with Nokia. I pitched this Ezekiel project, it got knocked back, and I started developing as a feature, which I am still developing. It's going really well. And then that third year, I pitched a Victorian period drama based on the parable of the prodigal son. And I made the final three. And my good friend, who I'd entered with, won instead, which was really hard because we'd kind of been like buddies. We're like, we'll go in together. And then he won. And I was like, oh, that's really hurts. Please do. But then I thought, you know, I've done it 3 times. I've been in that boardroom twice. If it was, I felt like that time that I lost, that was supposed to be me. And I felt like, you know, like I walked into the darkest timeline a little bit. Like, no, that was supposed to be my turn. And I really felt it. And it didn't happen. And it was a kind of disappointment that you just don't understand. Because you're like, everything was right. I did everything right. Which is one of those hard things for filmmakers to understand, that there is no right or wrong in film. It's just so subjective.
Sometimes there's that like 10% of just the way the wind blows.
Yeah. I mean, I found out that it was a very, very tight competition, which would make me feel good, bad. And then decided I'd go in for one last time, 2013. And this was this is a year after I just moved to London. So I'd moved in like 2011. At the end of doing Life on the Line, which was 2011, and entered. And I just thought to myself, if I'm doing this again, I'm just going to put in that idea I had last year that I thought was too big. I'm just going to go for it. It's a massive space sci-fi epic retelling the story of Jonah in the belly of the whale. I mean, the reason I chose it was because Jonah had just such a clear arc in terms of his character at the beginning being a certain way, and then having a redemption and having a change of mind. And I thought, well, that's a 3-act structure. I'll just use that, and I'm going to transpose everything from the deep sea to being deep space. I feel like it will work. And I went and pitched that, and I won it, which was great. Like, you know, £25,000 to make a film. And I was like, wow, that's great. But because I just made one at 15, I also knew it wasn't enough. So I was I had this instant feeling of, oh, I've got to make this now, because I'd pitched it with complete belief and enthusiasm, but I also had enough producer nous from having been a producer on all the previous projects, well, not all the shorts, but a couple of them, and all the music videos, to know that that wasn't going to make a lot.
Yeah, there's heavy CGI, right? And so what did you do?
All the competition wouldn't allow me to raise more finance, which was a real killer.
Really? So it was 25 grand, no more money, that's it.
It wasn't fair on previous people for me to bring in more money. So it was a bit of a shock, because I really wanted to
crowd. Why is that?
That was their rule, and I contested that, but I didn't really get very far for a while. It was only when
it's strange, because it's not up against previous works from the fund, is it? Like,
I don't know. It felt like it was. It felt like it was comparable, or it was the way. I mean, this is part of the brief of a company or a competition. It's like, how do they work? How do they see themselves? So we had to work within those limitations. So the film,
fair enough,
had huge limitations, because the ambition of the project was far beyond what I knew the budgetary constraints would allow. And that was really tough, because we had to keep finding workarounds for things that you knew needed money thrown at them, but we didn't have it. So, you know, even
like what?
Well, it's like building an entire spaceship versus finding an actual submarine to film on. Like we looked at the interiors of boats and oil rigs, and you know, it was that really hard decision. Do we build something that we have complete protective structure that we can just use for like 5 days without rain, and we have on-site toilets and we have green rooms, or are we going to be cramming all our crew into tiny vessels or small oil rigs or whatever, and just
that aren't designed for filming?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's those really hard choices just to get an aesthetic, then versus how much time you have in that place, even if it looks good. Those things were tough. And then working with visual effects for the first time in a way where it was so extensive. You know, like I spoke to visual effects coordinators and I sent them the script and they gave me their feedback, and I talked to them about previs. I just tried to get ahead of it as much as I could. So making decisions in a scene that action would take place in a certain part of the room, so that we wouldn't have to use head-up displays of computers too much. having to limit the amount of blocking for certain actors because knowing that they would be rotoscoped if they crossed a part of the room, all of this stuff. So, rehearsals. And before I even cast, I rehearsed with other actors in a scaled version of the spaceship interior with both the production and the DOP present, so we could start discussing which walls we'd take out, what props would need to be placed where for depth, and just giving the actors free rein, but then eventually realizing that they couldn't move around as much as they might want to. But that was really good to know ahead of time, because even though these weren't the cast performers, I would need to communicate that to what turned out to be quite A-list cast on the film. But I had good reasoning by that point, and the heads of department had all had made the same decisions.
Yeah. So that was. Have you made something since then, or is that the last one?
No, here's the funny thing. So I shot that in December of 2014, and we shot that in Huddersfield at Northlight Studios. We finished on 18th of December, so like really close to Christmas. One of the people who'd been on the pitch panel was David Jesse, who had just finished Interstellar, and that was coming out at Christmas, and he was doing the press tour. And because he'd been on the panel and he had given such great feedback on what he loved the character arc, he loved the Jonah so much. I had originally written it for somebody in their 60s or 70s, coming to the end of their career. But when we sent it to David and he expressed interest, it's just too brilliant an actor to turn down. So I had to start thinking about this with him in mind, and then he agreed to do it. So that was amazing. We just, he was there doing Interstellar, and I'll come and do your film for 5 days in between, which was a real boon for everybody on the production. He's got such gravitas, and that gave us casting ability as well. Our casting directors, once David was confirmed as the lead, a lot of the other actors at the same agency were kind of thrown to us as new talent, because I don't know, I imagine it's a bit like Ari Gold from Entourage sitting in a room going, okay, so David's on board this new sci-fi film. What new talent have you got for me? And so we got inundated with all this really young, fresh talent. We had amazing auditions and had a really good pick of young up-and-comers, which we would not have done if it had just been a spotlight call-out for a low-budget sci-fi.
Yeah.
So brought with him so much potential for us. And one of the people we cast was Jessie Buckley, who's now having a real moment, which I think will be more than a moment. I think she's going to be, a stalwart star of the future. And she came in and read for the smallest part, and within 5 minutes I was like, do you want to go outside and read this other part? And she came back in and read that, and it was just really obvious that she would work anywhere.
So that was a direct result from getting the name, and then the agencies wanted their casts, their up and comings to be associated with the project because of that.
But they wanted them working with David too. And if you're a big agency, you kind of know who's there, and you're kind of sharing. So it's kind of like getting in a door. Like David opened a lot of doors. But the question I didn't answer properly there was, so that was shot in 2014. I made 2 more short films after that before it was released, because it took 4 years of post-production to get it done.
That's why in my head it's the last, because we screened it last year in London.
But this is the hard thing as a director, is that you can shoot something and it might not make the screens. And I have shot 3 more short films since I shot Pulsar. So as a director, my work is hopefully has grown since then.
And have you stayed with the sci-fi? How did you come across that? How did that become a? Because it sounds like there were like sci-fi elements all the way through, from the beginning.
Yeah, I think it's not even so much a science fiction as just otherness. Like I think somebody showed a screening of like 3 or 4 of my projects and just said, this is somebody who explores the outsider, or just main characters whose perceptions of reality are altered. And I thought that's really interesting, because even the dramas are either supernatural or they have bits of kind of I wouldn't say magical realism, because it's not. It's more kind of sinister thriller, just mystery. So I feel like that's been going on throughout all the work. But it took, project 6 or 7 for me to recognise that was something I had in me that was coming out involuntarily, whether it was visual or tone or just choices.
Yeah. Well, it's your voice as a filmmaker, right? And touching on what we were talking about at the beginning, like finding that as you move along. And I
Yeah.
guess the moment it becomes conscious, and then you can look back and you be like, actually, it's kind of always been there. That's
Yes.
that's an interesting thing.
And
That's really interesting.
I didn't get that. I was given that by an introduction by somebody who else, and that's the great thing about having your work reviewed and about getting peer criticism, is that you don't know what it is you're trying to say sometimes, but other people are picking up on it in your work. And that's, sometimes it's hard, don't listen to criticism, or you actually do need to, as a filmmaker, be able to be reflective without it being personal. It might be painful, but that's part of being an artist. You've got to allow that.
100%. And if it's not painful, then it's probably not working somehow.
Yeah. That's in between. So I'd made Pulsar, got to the new year. I'd applied to the Directors UK Fund called the Alexa Challenge to do a teaser trailer for Tipping Point, which was the sci-fi I'd kind of made out of the story of Ezekiel, which was all about the Northern Lights. It was a big sci-fi. They said, yes, great, I've got some money. No money. You just get an Alexa camera, you get these gorgeous anamorphic lenses, we'll give you insurance for your crew. But that's, you have to kind of fund that film. So I looked into it, and the way I wanted to shoot, everything I wanted to do wasn't going to happen. So I said, look, I'm not sure I can, after all, do this project, because I want to go to Northumberland, and you can only give me like 40 hours of hire, part of this competition win. So then I ended up shooting a short film, Murmur, which you guys know.
Yeah.
And so that was working with a guy called Simon Cookson, who was the man who won the competition the year ahead of me at Enter the Pitch. So I'd managed to forgive him winning.
You're okay now. I'm over it.
That's the thing. It was a weird sensation to bring somebody else into a competition and to be pals and to feel like you're going through it together and for them to win, and then to not let that affect your working relationship, because relationships are long and winning is not the end game at all. So he wrote a short film called Murmur, which we did, and I was saving up for my wedding, and I just said, look, I'm going to take the few £1,000s that I've saved, I'm just going to pay my crew, because I'd just done a £25,000 short, and to shoot on no budget with nothing, I couldn't do it. I couldn't go backwards like that. I couldn't ask for free. And the level of people I was working with, it was the same DOP from Pulsar. He was out doing his, TV projects and bringing all of his wonderful crew. They needed paying. So, I mean, it took me another 2 years to save to get married, but I made that film.
I was going to say, what was your fiance like?
I mean, he's patient.
He was like, okay, if this is what you want to do.
I mean, careers are long, relationships are long, so that
yeah, for sure.
right time. And that was the surprise hit. It was a 7 to 8 minute film, two people in a wood having a conversation, pretty much nearly done as we wanted to do it as a one shot to start with, but didn't because of the rain. It was just too dangerous to have Steadicam working in those situations. And it just went to so many festivals, and it was just such a surprise hit because it was, to me, very dialogue driven, and everything I'd ever been told about short films is that, stay away from dialogue and make sure it's heavily visual.
It's funny because it shouldn't have worked, but it did. Like two people talking in a wood. Like that's the kind of the first thing that filmmakers out of film school do, or even not out of film school. People who just, guys and girls that want to go and make a film. There's a large proportion of them that think, okay, I can film in woods for free, and we can have a conversation in woods, and then there's lots of films of people talking in woods, but it moved so far beyond that it didn't even that wasn't a problem by any means.
I had met Simon on the green shoots, the very first thing. He was one of the writers on the very first short thing that I did with Vision and Media, and we didn't get to work together, and I desperately wanted to work with him, and his project didn't happen. So when it came to this many years later, what's from 2010, we're like 15 now, 5 years later, I had been keeping that script from that time, and we've been both really wanting to work together. So this opportunity came, and I guess it wasn't just something that I picked up. It was, I've been dying to do this for ages, and I've got this opportunity, so let's just shoot it. And pretty much made a film in a day. But then the gestation of it and thinking about it and his work and our relationship was 5 years. of like pre-production.
Yeah.
It was just the opportunity came. And I think what was so great about it was this was the first time I'd made something where no one else really got a say. There was no brief.
Mm-hmm.
So making something that I just thought no one else would want to see, and this is just me getting to work with this writer that I really love and this new producer that I really have, am inspired by, Jude Goldry, and creating those relationships. The project was about making the project with the people. It wasn't about where it's going to go or what it's going to do. So the fact it became this incredible sleeper hit for me was, I was like, I know nothing. I obviously know nothing about films or festivals because
I think we touched on it at the beginning where what did we say, like I mean, we didn't say this, but it's something along these lines of like the pressure to do good can sometimes be like a creative killer.
Yeah.
And then if it's just making a movie for the love of making a movie, then somehow the love gets infused in it.
Yeah. I need to make this story and I need to work with these people, and I wasn't in expectation or result. And I think for a lot of filmmakers, that's the killer, which is, when do I get my award? When do I get my recognition? When do I get my reputation?
Yeah. When's the phone going to start ringing? When am I going to be called to direct this next a really high budget thing?
When will this be the only thing that I can make my money from? We have all these expectations of the industry and our role in the industry, and it's just not what it really is. I just need to just plug this in because we're on 7% now.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
I'm back.
Hi. So there's lots of you've done lots of pitching. I didn't realize this. I knew you pitched for Pulsar, but I think that's about it. What would you say to people? Yeah.
Yeah. Do it. Just get into rooms and practice doing it. Before I got to enter the pitch, I've been pitching music videos for a really long time, and that's sometimes for BBC Three new talent competitions, going down to London, doing it in boardrooms, having just getting used to talking confidently about your idea, getting used to saying that you're a director without feeling like an imposter or an intruder, that you have some confidence in that, even when you don't necessarily know if you are yet. I think there's a real power in saying I am rather than I'd like to be.
I'd like to be, yeah. Imposter syndrome is a big thing.
Yeah.
I think lots of people watching this will have it because it's a real visceral feeling of like, I shouldn't be here. I'm not worthy of being here, and that's sad because it's not real. It's not a real thing. It's like the dark side of you trying to like sabotage you.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, sometimes it's a disguise of it's just fear. And I think the one thing about being a good director is your prep. And it's the same thing about going in for a pitch. You have to really prep that. You had to do all your references. You need to really look at it. You need to understand what it is that you're saying. You need to check your story beats. You need to be able to talk in a language at which other people who are financiers understand. So you remember, the people sitting in a boardroom might not be filmmakers. So how are you going to conversationally talk about your project in a way that translates and communicates with the people? So it's how many different formats does it need to take? So there's me talking, there's the printouts I've bought, there's a PowerPoint I'm going to show you, there's the video clip montage that gives you an idea of tone, there's my show reel that shows you my tone and ability. All these things combined, whatever sensory way that person is working, hopefully you've hit one of them. Even if it's just they need something at the end of the session to take home and read, maybe that's how you get them. Maybe all of the pitch was not, they didn't take it in. You just don't know, but you just have to be prepared that you're giving as many different stimuluses to get to the same point really clearly. Just don't.
That's an interesting point. So people take in information on different levels, and there's no way of knowing. So you have to try and hit all of them, like the visual, the reading, some people will be facts and figures, right? Especially if they're finance, they'll just want to know,
right,
where's it going to go, what's in it for us,
yeah,
how's it fit our mission, whatever their mission is, whether it's to, as you said earlier, to find new directors to work with, or whether they're just a charity that's funding particular stories.
So, I mean,
in
that's
the world.
if you put something in thinking of covering a base, like a draft budget, and somebody there is a producer and they just think that's a joke, you really have to know what you're doing is actually truthful and beneficial. Otherwise, you're going to look foolish and amateurish.
Yeah.
So it's this thing about being a good filmmaker, stroke in this case director or writer, which is just getting things really clear and simple, not making it too complicated. Understand why people have money that they want to give you. Don't try and fit yourself into the idea of the brief. Understand it, and then pitch what it is that you want to say. It has to be what you want to say, because somebody can always tell if it's inauthentic.
Yeah, 100%. And there's a mistake that we've been told about by several different people, where filmmakers will compare their films to other films, which is okay, but then compare their films to films that are totally non-comparable. So films with like A-list celebrities in, or A-list directors in, and I think that's, or even outliers like Paranormal Activity. So if you're pitching a feature film to try and get, this is specific to try and get funding, really, I guess. But we've heard of people pitching a feature film saying this film is going to be the next Paranormal Activity. All we need is £20,000 or whatever, and it's going to make. It could make. Is the implication? It could make this many million. Yeah. And I think that's a dangerous thing to do. As you said, you have to be realistic and you have to be clear.
Isn't it? Like, how does anybody know anything's going to make money? I think that's the thing you understand about the business, which is the whole time the business side of this, separate to the artistry, is that it's all huge risk. What can you do to make yourself less of a risk? How can you be more reassuring to financiers or to producers? And often the only way that you get that is by making work that people enjoy, has audience views, validates you, gets shared, wins awards. So you need to not constantly, but you need to continually search to create new work that will continue to establish your ability to be taking a risk on. How can we see? I've got 8 or 9 films now that will be able to show a breadth of, I'm working at this level with these people, and I'm getting this response. So I'm bankable.
Yeah, we call that the resonance within Liftoff. Like it's it's making waves. If you are already making waves, like resonating with audiences, and have like connections with audiences, and that only comes through making work, right? There's lots of chicken and egg here. Lots of filmmakers will think, oh, I've made a couple of shorts, now I'm ready to pitch for £500,000 to make a feature. And that might be true, but it's a bit of a red herring, because why the hell would anybody give you £500,000 if you've made a couple of short films and you can't prove that your work is touching an audience resonating with an audience on a large scale?
Which is the last project not the last one that came out, because I'll just skip through quickly. So Murmur came out as well. I got to work with you guys again. And then another film came out called Struck, which I did as a one shot on a beach with 104 Films from Sheffield. And that got selected at some very prestigious festivals. It went to Sydney. They flew me over to the Sydney Film Festival. Then in Edinburgh, and I did a panel talk about it. And then to Cork. So like 3 BAFTA nominated festivals. It didn't get into loads, but it got into a really small, select, high tier A-list festivals, which was the first time I'd been working at that level. And that was just pure drama.
How did you go about that? Did you approach them, or did you just submit through the normal channels?
No. 104 Films works with filmmakers with disabilities, so they had some money specifically to promote and highlight a different type of viewpoint, different lens on filmmaking. What do people who have a different, or the outsider's viewpoint say, or what do they show in their work? So that was an opportunity with them. And again, that was a very small, like £2,000 budget, 1-day shoot, 1 shot, 2 actors. But that was a bit like going back to Murmur and knowing that could be done, and that something. And again, that was working with a writer that I've been really admiring for a while, and just already had the content and just knew that it would work. But again, had no expectations of what might happen. It was more about, I want to work with these actors who I've been watching for years and I love, and this filmmaking team and this writer, and it's just for me. It's only a few £1,000. Just, I didn't think it would go or take me halfway around the world, which it did. And then it got selected for Short of the Week in International Women's Day last year, so it's done really well and it's out online. And then I managed to get Pulsar. This took 4 years for Pulsar to come out, and that got released this year in May with a company, a distribution company called Dust, who sci-fi, but through a main distributor called Gunpowder and Sky, who do horror and sci-fi.
Okay, so did they handle the distribution to Dust, or did you get Dust and them at the same time?
I put the trailer online on Twitter, and they got in contact with me through that, and then I kind of sold it to them. So I couldn't release it on any VOD platforms; it would just be theirs.
Dust are great. They my wife and I bought a TV, a pre-Christmas present, a TV in the Black Friday sales for our sins. Oh my God, it's like consumerism at its dirtiest. But anyway, we bought this new Samsung TV, and I turned it on, and the first thing that came up was this is a bit of a sidetrack, but the first thing that came up was a channel called Raku TV.
Yeah.
And literally the first thing that played was a trailer for an independent British movie with Bill Nighy, and I can't remember what the movie was called. It was like a seaside town.
Yeah.
And I was kind of blown away by it. I was like, bloody hell, Samsung, this is really cool thing for you to be doing.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a smart TV, so in the bottom they've got like, you know, Netflix, BBC, iPlayer, all of the apps. They've got their own Samsung TV app thing, and inside of that there's lots of different channels, and one of them is Dust. Yeah. So Dust comes pre-installed on Samsung televisions, and as a way of distribution for content that is not necessarily like marketable in terms of it's not gonna people aren't gonna necessarily pay for it. It's a really good way of doing it, like a really specific niche short channel that has great content on it. Yeah. That can find a huge audience, and it comes pre-installed on Samsung TV. So if you've got a Samsung TV, check it out. But did you know that?
No, I knew that they did have. I mean, I haven't had a TV for like 15 years. I do everything online. It's really old school. Or project it onto the wall. But I do know that they have an incredibly dedicated and niche selective audience who watch everything. And I mean, I put Pulsar up with them on, and then they will do it through a number of different ways. So they have their like YouTube online, they'll put it on Instagram, they put it on Facebook, separate uploads, and then they'll have it on the TV station as well. And within 4 months, we had 500,000 views. I was completely staggered because I'd never had anything go anywhere over like 20,000 views. But to be at 500,000, I think we now are at 890. So hopefully we'll hit 1 million in the new year. That would be...
That's really powerful. Like that's 1 million, back to the beginning of the conversation, 1 million bits of attention that are on you and your work, and creating that resonance, creating that kind of...
Well, actually, no, it is at 1 million. It's 890 on YouTube, but it has 100 and something on Facebook and another 80 something on. So it's already past 1 million people watching. Yeah. I think that's an important thing for filmmakers to think about, which is, well, great that you made something, but how are you going to get it seen? How are you going to get this content? Are we saying this? How do you get this to audience? How do you get people who are in overwhelm to watch your work? Yeah. And so it's finding.
This is what we try to do. This is our part of our mission as a company, that connection of work with audience. It's because it's a changing world, and that whole model that Dust is kind of highlighting is fucking fascinating. It's like do you know the Joe Rogan podcast?
Yes.
Or podcasts in general, like they have millions of views, and then it's content that lives there, and people can dip back into it, and then it's multiple millions. And it's a new way of consuming media. I think TV should be shitting itself. I mean, it's both can exist at the same time. That's a bit extreme, but like for somebody to be able to put out something and connect directly with audiences without any like layers in between, as it were, is amazing. Is amazing. It's the way, I think it's the way of the world, the future.
Yeah. I couldn't even pretend to guess what the future will look like because everything's changed fast.
100%. And with that comes the overwhelm, right?
Yeah. Well, but then you have to go back to, it's not about the fact that there's loads of stuff, and it's not about making a lot. It's about finding out what you have to say. Again, you have to just be you just have to shut down the noise in terms of, oh, this will make me look good, or this will get me where I want to go, or this will say, well, what do you need to say? What is it that people will want to watch? And all the projects that have done the best are because I had to make them.
Yeah, 100%.
And it wasn't even like, I have to make this to be seen. I have to work with this person. I have read this script that made me cry on the tube. I'm going to have to film this. And that's the kind of thing where you know instinctively this is something that needs to be done.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. It is, like, I mean, to use a cheesy word, because there is a sense of like, oh God, I've got to keep up. I've got to make more. I've got to just write. I've got to write more scripts. I've got to whatever people are coming up against. I can't speak for them, but they're just from my conversations with different creatives and their different challenges that they come against. But it is all possible, and it is all there, and it is a pretty exciting time to be a content creator. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
This is it. The thing about TV is that there is a lot. That means that people are willing to take in that medium risk. People are less willing to take risk in film, but they're more willing to take risk in TV. So it depends on knowing what it is that you want to make and knowing the right medium. It's the same thing as a brief, who is going to finance this? Is it going to be Sony? Is it going to be scot-free? Is it going to be Channel 4? Is it going to be Netflix? Is it going to be some small independent? You have to research the industry to understand where your work might fit.
100%. I think that's a very important point as well, because we come across we work closely with a lot of filmmakers, and that's an easy thing to forget, because filmmakers are creating, writers are teaming with directors and producers, and then it's easy to get into this kind of bubble, and then forget that actually this thing that you're creating, that you're birthing into the world, has the film industry is an industry, and there's track records of things that have come and gone before you. What's happened to them, and can you learn anything from that experience, from their own experiences, to bring into your own? And like, perhaps you can connect with companies that they've worked with through doing research, and not forgetting, not getting locked in this isolated bubble of there's director, writer, producer team just creating, and then forgetting to look outside.
I think that's because at the beginning of this, there was a question you asked me about what would you say to like your younger self starting out in the industry, and I think the answer to that is you're going to make films to work with people that you enjoy, and you're going to enjoy the creative process. Don't make films because you want to get somewhere or show somebody something or get known, because that's only going to disappoint you, and it's not going to lead you onto a path where you make more work that's enriching.
Amen. That's great. Namaste.
An hour of talking. I very much doubt anybody will get this far into our chat.
No, they will. This is an inspiring conversation. What's next?
So I have 2 feature films optioned. One only about a week ago, which is very exciting.
Oh wow!
So that's a folk horror film, and the other one is a sci-fi thriller. So the folk horror is called Speak Its Name, and the Speak Its Name, call it Sin for short. And then Tipping Point is the sci-fi thriller I've been working on for a while, which is about electromagnetism changing people's cognitive behaviour.
Oh wow, Interesting. And are you the writer of them? You wrote them?
Yep, writing both.
Writing both. And can you tell us anything about the option, or is it all hush hush?
All early.
All early.
So I mean things will be said in the new year.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I know I know it's a sensitive time when there's like early stages of contracts and options and things going on. So yeah, don't tell us anything. Secret.
No, we'll have another time, and I'll tell you all about it.
Yeah.
Maybe it will be moving by then. Who knows? But that's the thing about development, which is it's nice that people are interested in the work and the ideas. But again, it's a long road to a feature. So,
development's another conversation in itself. Perhaps we'll save it for another time. But like the development of a feature film, that takes funding in itself. And
it's like being 9 months pregnant for 3 years. It's really quite uncomfortable.
Yeah. 9 months pregnant for 3 years.
Yeah.
Are you going to get to direct it?
Yes, these are writer-director projects. Yeah.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's leave it on that little what's it called? Cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And it's been great to reconnect, Aurora. Thanks for taking the time. And
Thanks.
Is there anywhere that people watching can find you or your work? So Pulsar is on Dust. They can find it on their YouTube channel.
You can just put Pulsar Dust into YouTube and it will pop up.
What about you and your work?
You can find me on littlenorthernlight.com.
littlenorthernlight.com.
That's right, yes.
Great. I love your wall hanging. Seen your wall hanging.
Oh yeah, it was a wedding mandala from my sister. It's nice. Very calm. Thanks for inviting me in. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Good to speak to you. All right.
Yeah, you too. All right, Ben.
We'll reconnect soon.
Okay, take care.
Good luck with the feature development. Lots of love.
Speak to you later. You too. Have a good Christmas.
Bye.
Bye.
You too. Yeah, Merry Christmas. Bye.
Bye.